what I'd like to do now, we have the next session is about to kick off, and that's called, for obvious reasons, turning the electricity sector upside down. And so what I'll do is introduce the speakers, and then we'll have a panel discussion. So could we have the first speaker up, which is David Wildash from National Grid ESO. So if you come on the stage, I'll move some of the chairs. So National Grid has had a sort of, itself has been transformed, moving from a very large corporate to becoming an independent unit at the centre of the UK's energy system. And as part of that change, they've been doing some really innovative thinking, and David is going to tell you all about that today. Now, in theory, this thing, which I think was just purchased today, so actually, let's take 2 seconds and read this, because I think this sums up Greg and Chris's. We're facing an epoch-defining moment in energy. If we're to transition to net zero, we need to turn the energy sector upside down. And this workshop with you all here today is about sharing that multiplicity of solutions and challenging the status quo, but also us as suppliers and flexibility providers. And importantly, it's not about pilots. I'm done with pilots. This is about making it real. So, and I don't think I need to explain this graph to any of you in the room. So, David, it works, the technology. Over to you.
Great, thank you. I'll try without the microphone. Please do let me know if you can't hear me. We'll go from there. So, first of all, thank you. Great to be here to share our story. My name is David Wildash, Head of Market Operations within the ESO, the Electricity System Operator from Great Britain. We're still part of the National Grid Group, but from next year we will become a public entity, which should hopefully facilitate a quicker drive towards net zero, certainly within the UK. So today I'm here to really extend the story of what we've been through as a system operator within the UK over the last 6-9 months. So I'm going to talk about a product that we introduced into the market, thank you, called Demand Flexibility Service. So how did this product come about? Well, fundamentally, as we've just heard from Greg and Chris, obviously hugely disturbing the challenges out in Ukraine. And fundamentally, we as a system operator, a prudent system operator, have the obligation of making sure that we can support security of supply for the end consumer in Great Britain. So we were looking at, well, what tools have we got? Which ones can we pull harder? How do we make sure that we are in the best position that we can be to support what could potentially be the challenge of winter that's just gone? So we're looking at the tools at our disposal and thinking, well, what else can we do? So, we, like other countries, looked at some of the existing generation stations that would give us those active megawatts that wouldn't have been there if we hadn't intervened. So we went and procured 5 separate coal stations that would normally have been in retirement, kept them in the market to make sure that we had access to that should we have needed it. But fundamentally, we're also thinking about, well, what else do we not have access to? How do we make sure that we create a route to market so that we have them as a tool should we need them? We'd already been undertaking some trials. One was with Octopus, and within that, just to give you size and scale, we've been looking at testing what services we could get from the end consumer, and I think we scaled up to about 10 megawatts. Using that as a catalyst and thinking how can we build on that, we're looking to go from tens of megawatts to hundreds of megawatts, so we can really turn a dial and give us a large lever should we have needed it through the service. So that is how we ended up thinking about creating a new service and utilising domestic and indeed industrial and commercial flexibility to give us the solutions that we needed. So for us, we just heard about pace. We are an incumbent utility. We are trying to be more agile. I think if you look back historically, it would have taken us 12, 18 months to launch a new ancillary services. with the onset of the Ukrainian crisis, we needed to move at pace. Winter doesn't change, clock change, important date from a system operator perspective, 31st of October. That's when you start seeing darkness peak. That's when we're going to have peak loads on the system throughout the year. We had to think about how could we deliver those products in time for that. We'd already contracted with coal. How could we access demand that normally didn't show up and give us that tool that we needed? So there were 5 sort of things we thought about in terms of the design of it. First of all, simplicity. It had to be simple to make sure that individuals could understand it and to participate. It wasn't just us who had to build our services and think about it, but providers had to gear up in readiness and work with the end consumer to also deliver that. So it had to be simple. Transparency, making sure that people understood what that was, putting data out there, creating more of a market type signal to maximise the impact of that. Minimising uncertainty, again, a lot of collaboration. That was key to delivering this product. It was working with the market, all different participants, to listen, learn and absorb to create something that worked for everyone to make sure that we maximise the ability to access it. And then finally, access and new flexibility. We wanted to make sure that the lever was tools and megawatts that we hadn't normally seen in the market. Yes, traditionally we've had some large-scale industrial demand parties play in the market, but we've never been able to access residential end consumer at scale and indeed small industrial and commercial loads. So thinking about how could we monetize that and bring that together. There's some key stats, but just to bring the product to life a little bit more. So this is a pay-as-bid product. We procure it on a 24-hour ahead basis, so by 4 p.m. the day before, so our darkness peak between say 5 and 6 p.m. we would go out, and by 4 p.m. the day before, we would go out through an auction, we'd put out our requirement, and we would procure what we needed. Note that this was a new product, and that for participants to build their own capability to deliver the active megawatts, we needed to incentivize that, monetize that. So what we undertook was this concept of having a test. So we guaranteed 12 tests throughout the year if you signed up from November. And that's twofold. It allowed us to get operational certainty to make sure that we understood the tool. It allowed us to test different times of the day, differing days of the week. We're in for a weekend to a week, so we could start to understand if we pulled that lever, how many active megawatts would we get at the macro scale when you're thinking from a system operator perspective. An important caveat, and this was a regulatory position as well, was that we didn't want to distort the market. We firmly believe in markets to deliver those pricing signals, to deliver the response that we need. However, to bring this was going to be what we call a out of the market tool, so only to be utilised once everything else in the market was used. So moving on to the graph on the right, we had in total 19 onboarding tests. We guaranteed 12, but as differing parties came to the fore, part of their investment, we would test them to make sure that they could deliver. So we had to run 19 tests in total. But we also used the tool on 2 consecutive days, 23rd and 24th of January. That was where it was a live test environment, where sitting there as a system operator on a day-ahead basis, we had insufficient margin to meet the requirements for real time the next day. So we went out to market, invoked the signals, and looked to run a live auction and pay as bid. And at that point of the day, we ended up paying up to £6,000 per megawatt hour. So we looked for the market to send that signal. How high would that price go? It was around 6,000. I should say for the test days, this was a real active debate with the industry to provide sufficient financial incentive to build a product to make sure that you could pull those levers and that consumer behaviour potentially change. We set a guaranteed acceptance price of £3,000. So essentially, if you were in a test, we would pay £3,000 per megawatt hour. Hence, it had to be outside the market because other tools at our disposal average about £250, £300 a megawatt hour over the course of the winter. Product went live beginning of November, went through to 31st of March. A few more stats to bring it to life. We had 1.6 million differing end consumers or businesses supporting this product. We started off Octopus, we were one of the first individual organisation to come to the fore. But throughout the winter we grew that. To the end we actually had 31 differing organisations participating. So a real groundswell as people saw and built out their own capability to offer that. And also a consumer-led draw to have that capability. So you saw consumers asking their energy supplier, who were the predominant party who brought these megawatts to the market, asking them, why can't I participate in this demand-to-down service? 350 megawatts is pretty much where we got to by the end of it. Yes, we were hoping for more, but like any new market, things take a little bit of time to build. So that's some of the key sort of stats. We did this in 4 months, far quicker than we would usually do it. And we recognised it wasn't perfect. We had to act at pace. We had to put that catalyst in. I was really pleased with the team, how quickly we responded. But what's really important is we don't lose that momentum. And we make sure that now that we've opened up this, now that we've got that engagement, how do we continue to maintain that? So knowing that we've still got an energy crisis, we still don't know what's going to happen in Ukraine, we still don't know if Europe's going to have enough gas. There are some tail-end risks out there. So we are looking to reintroduce demand flexibility service into the winter coming. Again, we'll look to end of October through to 31st of March. But they're iterations, they're improvements that we can make. And the hexagons here, there's 4 sort of areas where we're actively engaging with participants just to really drive that, make sure we get the right shape. First of all, who should be providing this? Is it a supplier-led model? Should it be really stimulated by system operators? Is it going to happen organically? Who needs to be involved in that? Then thinking about the prices, these red boxes here. How many tests do we need? How much money do we need to put into this market to really stimulate it and make sure that it's enduring? Guaranteed acceptance price. Is it £3,000 when that's 10 times the price that we actively saw on average over the winter? What can we put out and what have we learned? And what do we do in terms of the auction mechanisms, etc., if we get more megawatts coming through and there's greater active competition? All the orange ones, loads of work we can do in terms of the nuts and bolts of the product. The big one here, baseline methodology. The end consumer, how do you get that methodology which really reflects what the counterfactual case would have been? How much would that consumer take in as demand at that point in time? Lots to do there. Do you move it within day rather than have to call the day ahead? Things like that. And then finally the green ones, and this is where we've had to collaborate as an industry. Who owns that end consumer relationship? Who's responsible for helping make sure that that's brought to the fore? As a system operator, we don't have that direct consumer interface. We shouldn't do anyway. We're not the experts in that space. But how do we make sure the messages that we're putting out are sympathetic and work and support the wider industry in bringing forward all these megawatts that are there potentially? So those back pocket slides, there's some bits and pieces if we get into more of the questions, but I'll end there. But just to summarise, so we bought a new product to the market, scaled it up from say 10 megawatts to 350 megawatts. That's what was capable. This whole industry got behind this, the regulator got behind it. We're up to 350 megawatts. We have a conviction that we want to continue down that pathway. Ultimately, we want this to be a commercial product that just competes with everything else, and we don't have to do anything. We will become the residual balancer again. Price signals will create the behaviour that we want. But for that, we need full smart meters everywhere. We need market half-hourly settlement. We need technology overlay across all those parties to deliver. I'll leave it there. I'm recognising that time is of the essence. So thank you.
If you take a seat. So it was a really interesting mic. I'll take the mic. I'd now like to welcome, first of all, that was a really interesting run through, new product, new service, developed very quickly. I thought the last piece was really interesting, where you're talking about how that product innovates, because I think that's one of the interesting things about the industry. We're sticking products out there, and we need to keep building and iterating around them and improve them as they go. I'd now like to welcome David Zenner and Amandine Leroux. David's Manager of Consumer-Centric Market Design, and Amandine is Head of Customers. And they're from Alida Group, so building on what Chris has already said, and apologies for your job title, we'll switch things around. There's this, and the mic is probably useful.
Okay, hello everybody. Just kind of test this. Yeah, okay. Just gonna go one back. Good, yeah. Today, actually, we want to bring a little bit deeper insights on what Chris already told in the introduction, of course. That's always not too good to come after him. But I'll try to be a little bit more precise. That's our role then, to bring some more insights into this on what we are building up, like Chris said. So we want to present some changes to the market design, the evolutions that we think are absolutely necessary in order to unlock mainly the flexibility, where we're talking a lot about it. But for us, it's not only about the reflections about on how we're going to operate the system, but also on how the consumers, and it was already said in the beginning, I think I'm a little bit too far from, we truly believe that there is also a big change in how consumers see our sector. We compare it often to other sectors where a lot of things are already possible, which we believe will come naturally also in our sector, which will be the expectations of the consumers actually in our sector. And you can find a couple of those elements. I think they're quite obvious. All here as a consumer, that's some of the future needs that we see. The digitalization will offer that, but also some very easy ones. If you go with your car with friends and you want to charge, then it should be logic that it is on your own bill and that you don't have to pay your friends for the electricity that you're consuming over there. So kind of logic evolutions, we believe that will come, and that should also be made possible in our sector, in how we operate the grid, and that's why we reflect a lot those last years on how to make this happen, how to shift actually from a system where today, if you flip on the switch, there is a little bit more production coming into the system. How actually you shift that system to a system where actually demand will respond to what is the production at that moment available. Because also on the production side, it has been mentioned already, we see huge changes, huge evolutions. And so we will need to adapt our consumption patterns to that situation. And luckily, of course, a lot of those elements are possible because we have a lot of opportunities coming into the system with those electrifications on the appliances that we see, which offers a lot of flexibility, and also with the technology and the evolutions, we truly believe that it is something that will be achievable. It won't come with doom scenarios, so it's not about intervening and blocking somebody from consuming, like was said, but it is rather building some smartness, some intelligence in our demand patterns, and making them react on the price signal. It has been mentioned already. So that actually, that demand will adapt to what is basically produced at that moment. By doing so, we really believe that we empower more the end consumer, because that's also a little bit our goal. It's you need also to empower more the consumer to give him more opportunities, more possibilities. We want to develop, of course, a generic model, which is usable for all kind of markets that we see. we are a lot as system operators maybe focusing on that balancing market. We want to take it out also of the balancing market. Balancing market is in the end just a very small market. It's one of the smallest. There's a way bigger market, a way bigger opportunities, and flexibility need to come there also in. So we want to build up a model which is generic enough that is able to cope with all the kind of time frames we are looking for, and it should always, and it was already mentioned by the colleague before, easy, simple, understandable, and take out as much as complexity as we can do. So to do so, it is not only about the market model. That's of course one of the most important ones. But next to that, there are two other big building blocks that we should work also. It's a lot about access to data also in the energy market. I think on that we are the most outdated market or sector, I would say, that you can imagine. In a lot of countries, you're not able to know what you're consuming right now. You maybe will know it in the next month, but in the most only 1 year after. I don't know any other sector where this is possible, but it is the case in a lot of countries still. So we need to have the digital meters coming in a way faster approach in a lot of countries, especially Belgium, Germany are two typical examples where it should be accelerated. You need also an easy access to your data, also from OEMs, for example, your EVs, having access to your own data. In the end, it's your own data, and being able to share it with third parties in order to just have those new services popping up. And then, of course, it's our role, we believe, also to foster and to facilitate the creation of those new services. Not that we're going to enter into that, but we want to actually build that up, make it possible, build the coming building blocks that are needed in order to do so, making sure that everything is settled in the back ends afterwards correctly, so that actually those energy service providers can bring those services from the first slide to the end consumers. There are also two main building blocks where we, of course, are working. But today we want to focus on the evolutions in our consumer-centric market design. Actually, they are built on two big pillars. The first one is that we want to give the keys back to the end consumer, give him more opportunities, being able to interact in different kind of constellations, different kind of contractings, and not being stuck with one main actor on his access point, on his physical connection to the grid. So actually make him choose. He can, of course. There's no obligation to do different as today, but at least he needs to have the possibility, for example, to enter into some different constellations behind his meter also. For example, he could opt to choose for another supplier for his EVs, for his EV, of course, or for his heat pump. For the big appliances, we believe that it should be facilitated that he enters into those different constellations. How are we doing that? Very simple. We're just gonna reallocate the blocks of energy to the right market party, to make in the end a correct settlement and treatment of those volumes according to the different market parties. So that's a concept of exchange of energy blocks that we have developed. Actually, you could say that it is bringing the competition for the meter, which we have seen already in the last 20 years of liberalization, to a more competition behind the meter, where we hope that also on the appliances level we could do that. And of course, this should be enabled by embedded meters. There's no reason to put additional digital meters behind that meter to count. It's like on your iPhone, you don't have an extra meter on your iPhone to look at what your telecom company is invoicing you. So we should have also the embedded meters as the kind of way on how to settle that, and you still have a physical reference point to the grid operator with the digital meter in place. This is not enough to change your behavior, of course. You have a lot of more possibilities, but that doesn't mean that you're going to consume in the moments where there is abundance of energy, or consume less when there is not enough. And therefore, been mentioned also by Chris, you need a real-time price signal. You need really that price signal, which is actually incentivizing you in changing your habits, in moving from those moments where electricity is very expensive, and to adapt your consumption pattern. And Amandine, my colleague, will now go deeper into those two pillars, and explain, give some more explanations and examples on that.
Thank you. To come back on how you can trigger flexibility and to go back on the price signals, there is two ways basically on how you can trigger flexibility. The first well-known way is to give an explicit signal, a request of activation from the transmission system operator. There you request for a volume and basically a balancing service provider provide this volume. But there is another way, which we already use at Ilia and which we want to use even more in the future, which is a financial incentive to trigger this flexibility. And to do so, we have engaged as Ilia Group in an evolution from the imbalance price to a real-time price. What we want to build here is really move from a penalty to a clear incentive to deliver flexibility. We want to move somehow from a calculation which is done ex post to a clear ex ante value that you can follow to trigger your flexibility and to engage it, to value it in the end. And finally, we also want that this signal can be used as a single indicator. Why is that? If you look at the system imbalance today in Belgium, you need to look at the volume, the system imbalance, you need to look at the price, you need to look at the regulated volume engaged by the transmission system operator to know when you need to engage the flexibility to support the system. What we want to have here is one single indicator that you can follow to engage your flexibility in the end in a secure environment so that you know which price you will get in the end. Yeah. So that was a part on the more theoretical aspects, but if you come back to what is the most important in the end, I would like to highlight what we can do with those market traders, what we can offer to our customers as services. And when I say we, it's not only the TSO, of course, it's the TSO with the help of all energy service providers. First of all, you could think of building an energy community. You have renewable production on one of your sites, but you also have other sites, and you would like to share this energy and optimizing it amongst all your sites. That will be possible thanks to those two pillars. You could also think that you have solar panels and you don't use this energy on weekends, and you would like to give this energy to your employees. That will also be possible thanks to such an energy community. Another example is you allow your employees to charge your car, or you even have your own car charging at home, and you would like to valorize this flexibility. You will be able to appoint an independent aggregator to participate into balancing services, for example. Another way to do it, and I think we talk a lot of this example today, would be to have a supplier or a BRP, if you are connected to the TSO, that will value directly your flexible assets, for example, your battery, directly on market prices, day ahead, intraday, but also balancing, of course. And yeah, finally, we also have one example, which is mainly seen at TSO level, which would be that if you still have room, still capacity on your site, you would be able to let another investor build one renewable production on your site. And the thing is, if you can allow another supplier to take that responsibility to supply this energy, or mainly to sell it, you will be able to lower the risk on your industrial sites, because the risk is always based on the intermittency of the renewable production. Thus, appointing several suppliers on one side allow you to value differently your assets. Now, to make it even more concrete, I would like to present you one of the services we will make available by the end of the year at Ilia for our customers. This one is the possibility, and it's the one I just illustrated, to appoint several BRPs on one side, behind one access point. Today, you can already have some solution, but really not flexible. By the end of the year, you will be able to completely split the assets on your side between different BRPs. The first example would be that you have a base load, which is your demand facility, for example, and you would like to have a quite flat price for this base load because there is no flexibility there. You can appoint one BRP for this industrial site. Then a second BRP would take over the responsibility of your flexible assets. For those assets, you would like to optimize them on the market prices. Then finally, you still have some production on your side and you would like to sell this production at a better price. Then you will appoint a last BRP to sell this energy. One small illustration on what is the cost savings or the benefits that can be done by customer if he participate in such a service. And there we take the case of a BRP that will valorize flexible assets on market prices. If you take, for example, a battery of 1 megawatt and a content of energy of 2 megawatt hours, and you will optimize this battery based on the publication we already have today at ILIA, which is a 1-minute publication of the value of the imbalance price. If you take this and you take a few assumptions, you take a few assumptions. The first one is that you will react with a 5 minutes delay on that price. So to allow, I don't know, any response time in the system, something like this. Two other assumptions will be that you need a threshold up and down to decide when you inject or when you consume the battery with the battery. And finally, you have to take into account, of course, the limited energy. What we've done, we've taken the prices of year 2022, and we have looked at two different scenarios. The first one is the active participation, and the second one, a conservative participation. For the active participation, we decided to use two types of thresholds. The first one, when the battery will inject, is at the moment the price is at 250 euros per megawatt hour. And then the second threshold in the downward direction will be minus 50 euro per megawatt hours. If you take this scenario, you will have an imbalance revenue that amounts to 100 kilo euros. And that is, of course, based on the high prices of 2022. Here, what you have for the battery is around, on average, 3 to 4 cycles a day. If you look now at the conservative participation, and there you have less cycle, less than 1 cycle per day, and you take, for example, the result of 500 euros per megawatt hour in the upward direction, and a minus 100 euro, you will be able to have a 50 kilo euro revenue for that year. So just a rough example, but I think this shows really the possibility that you have if you use your flexibility and you optimize it on market prices. And one last service that we would like to have.
Yeah, to wrap up here is actually what you've seen is of course the optimization on the imbalance price, which is already doable today. The next thing that we want to do is also, like I said in the beginning, bring it to the broader markets. How to bring also valorize your assets on day ahead and intraday markets. And what we want to do there is actually is facilitating the access to those markets through a new concept that we also are developing. We call it market access MPX, market platform access, where we are building actually together with of course the power exchanges on how you can actually valorize in the end your solar panels or your electrical vehicle on those markets directly. So where Chris was referring to, become your own day trader on the stock exchange. Well, this should be also possible in the energy sector, and at least what we want to do is bring down the barriers until you can do so. So that's the ambition that we have to go. So that next step, of course, whether maybe a couple of geeks that will do that, but at least if you bring down all those barriers, you will facilitate competition, and that's in the most sense what we are aiming for. So the next product we're launching is evolution in those steps, where we're looking, of course, in how to facilitate that, how to interact with the stock exchanges on the low volumes, of course, that we will be trading over there, and how does that meet with also the balancing responsibility services, etc. So a lot of more initiatives to come. Thank you very much.
So from one voltage level and one geography to a completely different part of the world, and really interestingly, a really different way of approaching some of the problems. So I'd like to welcome Alida Jansen van Vuuren, who's head of DSO at Ausgrid. I was so excited when I discovered what Ausgrid was doing that I started telling everyone I met.
Thank you so much, Marcia. Yes, go to the first slide, see if that works. Yes, yes, I'm Alida. I'm the head of DSO at Ausgrid. Just for a little bit of context, so there are 15, do you want me just to pretend to push and then you know? Okay, good. So there are 15 distribution businesses in Australia. We call them distribution network service providers. We don't call them DSOs. So for us, when we talk about DSO in Australia, we generally mean the future role of the network, the thing that the distribution network is turning into, where we're thinking about, you know, the services we're offering customers and how we support net zero. So head of DSO is not as impressive then for that reason, really thinking about those future services. Similar regulatory framework to the UK, so we have distribution, transmission, generation and retail or suppliers. And Ausgrid is on the East Coast. We're the largest distribution business in Australia, and we have just over 4 million customers that we are there serving. So let's just give you a little bit of insight as well. I think the other thing that's interesting to appreciate about Australia is that 1 in 3 residential customers have solar on their roofs. So it's a very different level of engagement that we have from our residential customers. So there are 2 key points that I wanted to make today. The first one is that as networks, we provide a service. So we provide a network service, and we can see that the way customers are using that service or how they rely on that service is changing. The things they're using it for is changing. And actually how we think about our core service matters. So thinking about what does it look like to connect to the network? How do we price for that service? What do we offer? Those things really fundamentally matter. It's going to play a significant role in a transition. The second point is that to optimize millions of endpoints, to optimize a system with a lot of active resources, you need decentralized approaches. So this idea of we can centralize in a centralized marketplace, optimize everything that's happening out in the distribution network is flawed. You really need to be able to instill decentralized optimization and intelligence to deliver solutions in the future. So with that in mind, we had a bit of a think in Ausgrid a few years ago around what is the future role of the network? What is the DSO in that context? So we know that the energy system is changing. We know that the flows from the distribution network itself is becoming more complex. We know that we need to have more flexible demand in the wholesale market to respond and match generations. We know all these things are happening, but what is the role of the DSO within that, and how do we support that happening? And we know also that network capacity in the distribution network, as more and more of these resources connect to the distribution network, will become a constraint. So how do we manage that network capacity? How do we think about it? So there were 2 main models that we thought about. The first one is, I guess, the kind of classic what we're talking about here when we talk about flexibility. quite often is the network as a service provider. So the network, sorry, as a service buyer. So the network buying flexibility from customers as a means of managing network capacity. So you open up the network value stack, you help VPPs make a business case by making sure that you're rewarding them as they provide you services in their distribution network. The issue we see with this is that it creates a cause-area benefits model where we're actively starting to pay our customers not to use our service. So I'm just going to stop there again. We're paying customers not to use our service. Right? So we thought there must be another way. And the way we thought about it is the network as a service provider. What does it look like if we think about, for instance, virtual power plants and what service they need from the network? What is it that they connect to the network for? What are they using the network for? And what does the service look like that meets their needs? And so we really started thinking about, what are... Sorry, being pregnant really takes it out of you sometimes. Okay, we can do this. No, I'm fine, yeah. We're good, okay. We can do this. So really thinking about the network service we provide, what does our connections look like, what do our tariffs look like? And saying, let's actually incentivize our customers or add the kind of the signal of what it costs to use the network into the value stack for customers. And that doesn't mean we don't pay for services ever. That's not what we're saying here at all. There are times when, say, someone with a backup generator in an area where you have a constraint agrees to come online to help you during peak demand events, you pay for that service. Like, we're not saying you don't pay for services, but you fundamentally shift it and you think, what is that service? How do we help customers, and particularly market-facing customers like virtual power plants, participate in markets? And a lot of that is actually just getting out of the way. So making sure we don't distort behavior in the market through the way that we price the network. So Project Edith, my partner jokes and says this is my firstborn, and this is the second one. Project Edith is a project we came up with to really demonstrate what we mean by this and to start the journey in Australia. We spent a lot of time working with other network businesses in Australia as well, and some of these concepts, and we really wanted to make it real. So this is what it looks like. In Project Edith, we have a customer that has a bunch of different flexible resources connected to their house, which they primarily use for themselves, right? They didn't get those things for us, but there's value in that. You've got a customer agent, which is Reposit, which is our aggregator that controls and optimizes on behalf of the customer and offers them a simple product. In Edith, what that looks like at the moment is they call it a no-bill product. So you invest upfront as a customer in their technology, and then you don't pay any electricity bills for 5 years. So you don't have to think about it. So that's what we mean by a simple customer offer. And we're not saying that's the only model. We think there will be a whole bunch of different customer models that come out of that. Then the DSO, which is Ausgrid, we provide a dynamic network service to the customer agent, which they use to participate in markets. And we include both positive and negative pricing. So when we have an event that we require network support for, we do create an incentive for that as well. And we also think a lot about what is our role as a DSO to support the maintaining system security in an end-to-end system, and certainly some really interesting things happening in Europe around networks providing those auxiliary services as well into the market. That's not what that's supposed to look like at all. Can you go to the next one? Yeah, that's okay. I'll try. If everyone can try and ignore the blue line, okay. It's going to be this thing like, don't think of an elephant exercise. Ignore the blue line. We're going to try and talk to it. I might just point to it a little bit to make it easier. So what we did in Edith is we started quite simple. So this was the first time last year in June when we started publishing pricing to our aggregator. So we publish 5-minute pricing, and we do it in 5 minutes, not because we need a 5-minute response, but because that's what they're optimizing for in the market. So we're thinking about the optimization engines and how they take our signal into consideration as well. What happens is we just initially said, okay, well, we know we've got two typical times where we need network support or where it matters how customers use the network. In Australia, that's in the middle of the day when there's a lot of solar. And then also in the evening for heating or cooling. So we just started with a basic heuristic that said, on days when it is sunny, we have a solar circuit tariff that pops up. If it's not sunny, it doesn't exist, right? And on days when it is cold or hot, we have a peak. So you can, let me just try and. So that's the price for using energy on this day, and that's the reward for exporting energy, providing generation on this day. So it's a two-sided tariff, both imports and exports. And you can see this as like a tiny incentive there for using energy when the sun is shining in that particular area. And that's it, right? So we just started with that. The rest of the time, you can see our prices are pretty close to zero. The only thing we're recovering is some minor costs that we, for some of the jurisdictional schemes that we have to recover some money for. But other than that, it's flat, which means the rest of the time, the network capacity is available for that aggregator or for that customer agent to participate in the market. So we get out of the way a lot of the time, and we create incentives only when we need them. Now, that's pretty simple, but we also had to do a whole bunch of other things with it, and we're continuing to test how we do things like, you know, residual cost recovery. It's not all just short-run marginal cost, for example. And so we are looking at things like capacity subscriptions for sort of a forward-looking price that aggregators also say what capacity they need, and things of that nature. So there is a whole bunch of things that go in with it, but simplistically what we've said is most of the time, let's try and have no price for using the network if we actually don't have any reason to disincentivize you from using the network. Let's let you use the network to trade. So where we are now, we've done this rapid demonstration with a single customer agent or trader or supplier to show that it's possible. We're moving into expansion phase at the moment. We've just put out an expression of interest for additional customer agents, but we're also actually trying to get other DSOs to join us in Australia. We need to show, we need consistency in how we do these things to really give suppliers certainty to invest and develop products. We're looking to move to an on-market trial tariff. So at the moment, we're settling that the tariff outside of the normal systems in the trial as we're doing the proof of concept. But really moving to an on-market trial where this replaces the tariff that, or the network price or the network rate that we give that retailer or supplier. And then really listed tariff is when we start offering this at scale. In the meantime, though, I think the important thing is that what we're doing in Edith and what we're testing in Edith is also informing a spectrum of dynamic network services that we offer. So we do think about the DSO as fundamentally offering a dynamic network service. So one of the things, for instance, we're doing is we're introducing a listed tariff, a real tariff for storage-only connections starting 1 July next year. So as we go, we're getting inspired by what we're learning in Edith and demonstrating in Edith and starting to transform our services. Just one last comment I wanted to make is that as part of our DSO visioning that we did a few years ago, dynamic network pricing is very much part of our story, but we understand it's not the only thing that we have to do as a DSO. So we understand that we manage a dynamic system. We understand that we play a role in the end-to-end system as well. So I just wanted to leave that there to sort of say, very focused on that dynamic pricing and how that's playing a part, but I also appreciate the nuance of some of the other challenges we have as DSOs. That's it.
So a fascinating look at how you look at the low voltage networks in a dynamic way. So all the speakers we've had so far have been from networks. Now I'd like to welcome to the stage Alex Schoch, who's head of global flexibility and who, in a sense, brings the consumer to the stage. So Alex, over to you.
Okay, hi. First of all, thank you all for coming again. It's wonderful to have such a great, diverse group that are all interested in the same topic, which is wide-ranging, complicated, but we also have to make it really easy. And I think that's, if we think of any energy system, flexibility has always been there, right? And it's just fundamentally that and I think Chris mentioned it before, every fossil generator that retires needs to be replaced with the same, if not more, megawatts or gigawatts worth of incremental flexibility. And the opportunity now it's actually here, because we have two fundamental trends that are coming together, which is the electrification of everything together with the renewable energy generation transition. And consumers will play a part and do play a part today. And I think that's one of the things which there's a bit of myth busting that we need to do, that I think all of us are involved in, but we need to do it faster, which is that it's here today. This is not a tomorrow thing. Like, consumers actually do engage, and they engage as long as the products are out there for them to engage with. And just really quickly, there's three kind of areas where I can use examples to kind of showcase how that happens today. But this is definitely not a MECE list. This is just three areas as examples. If we look at tariffs, so how, at the end of the day, consumers buy a product, they buy a commodity, and it works. And if you give them the right price signals, their behavior shifts. Germany is in the midst of an incredibly rapid heat pump and heating revolution, as is all of Europe, accelerated, of course, by a gas crisis that has kind of brought 150-year-old technology that's way better already just to the top of people's minds. But one of the consistent refrains that I've had across Europe, actually across the world, is yes, heat pumps are great, but combined with the electrification of transport, it's going to completely destroy our grids, and we're going to have to slow down all of this rollout because we simply cannot build enough to keep up with this capacity increase. But actually, we've proven we launched this smart tariff for heat pump customers in December, so middle of winter, and immediately, with 2 low-cost periods and then a kind of penalizing high-cost period, we saw consumers immediately adapt and look at that consumption shift. You're seeing 45% of total daily demand goes into the low-cost periods while still maintaining the above 3 kind of coefficient of performance in terms of converting electricity into heat. So, and this is real-world data, and I think this is another thing where we sometimes find ourselves in this innovation cycle that doesn't actually get to the real world. But we don't have time for an innovation cycle that takes small closeted groups of self-selecting customers that then kind of makes it a little bit bigger and then takes 10 years to get into any form of scale. We simply just don't have the time anymore. And it's a huge opportunity. So option 1, demand can be shaped, and it can be easily shaped if you put the right price signals out for customers simply with a tariff. It's a little bit finicky, sorry. All right. The next one, David talked about the demand flexibility service. I mean, in terms of any service design purist, it's a blunt tool. But it's a blunt tool that was conceived and put into national use in 4 months, with literally the only requirement for participation is having a smart meter. Now, of course, we could sit here and we could talk about, yeah, well, that's not good enough because, are consumers going to do it? Are they going to do it for long enough? Are they going to do it repeatedly? And then the novelty will wear off. But the problem is that, if you did a trial and another trial of self-selecting customers over and over again, you're going to reinforce whatever ingoing hypothesis you wanted. And more generally, the answer will be, oh, well, we need to do another trial because we need to tweak some parameters. And consumers are engaged if you let the people, the interface to the consumers actually develop the products. And so in this case, we created saving sessions. Consumers who turned down could opt in every time there was an event. They could opt in on their phone, they could opt in on their browser, and they got Octo points. And they were told how much carbon they saved. And that worked. You know, could it have been better? Yes, we've got so many ideas of what to implement for the next season. And adjacent series. For example, this was a day ahead service. Now, without telling David, which he's probably still a little bit cross about, on our last session, we actually didn't notify day ahead, we notified within day from 6 hours up until actually delivery point. And we still got in the same range of response. Average response was 128 megawatts. I think we got 108. So, you know, by and large, it's pretty good for cutting down notification time by almost 24 hours. Okay, well, this is amazing. I don't even press a button and slides change. The next pillar is is full automation, but full automation with consumer control. Because there's a lot of things where, like, you know, if I'm buying something, whether it's a 50,000 euro car or a 15,000 euro solar system and battery, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be the last thing I'm going to do is like, yeah, sure, let me give it control to someone who's going to pay me 10 euros a month for that benefit, right? But if you give consumers a simple proposition with a disproportionately good value outcome for them that they trust and works, it's amazing how quickly this scales. And so Intelligent Octopus is our smart charging EV tariff. So it smart charges the EV, it's integrated into the whole tariff. It actually fundamentally disassociates the price that the customer pays with what you're doing with the asset, because in terms of the merit order of what you're solving for, the customer's mobility needs are number one. And everything else is secondary. And by the way, the customer can always override, can always opt out, can always just turn off smart charging. And all of this can be done from the customer's phone, and through our Kraken platform, we connect to those cars, we connect to the home batteries, the smart thermostats, and can onboard within 5 minutes. So a customer can connect to their assets, switch to this tariff, all from their phone within 5 minutes. So over the length of this first half of this session, we've probably added somewhere between 200 and 400 customers onto Intelligent Octopus. The next slide, please. And you know, the impact is real on an individual meter point basis, at an individual distribution level, and at a national level. Because, you know, in Germany right now, I mean, we're starting to see the rollout of smart meters, but right now I think it's still tiny, which means that fundamentally every EV, and 1 in 4 cars putting on the road now, is an EV. Alida said, you know, in Australia, 1 in 3 households has solar and a battery. So this is not this is no longer it's coming in the future. These technologies are about to become an issue or like an opportunity. They're here at scale. But right now, every network operator in Germany and in Belgium actually is probably facing this, which is that every single EV customer is getting home and plugging in as soon as they get home, because they have absolutely no reason not to do that. Because they play a fat fee, and well, they actually don't know how much they're using because they have to read a meter, or a meter is read once a year, and then they get a bill on an annual basis. So now, you know, V1, you can do a very simple block, but then, you know, to Chris's earlier point, that kind of starts looking very blocky, and it doesn't really, you know, if you then think about a dynamic energy system where you're settling on half an hour, 15 minutes, 5 minutes, that doesn't also really solve, because that just means that if I do that at scale, and we have 100,000 customers doing that every night, that becomes its own problem. And so but then when you take it to the next level of, you take all of those prices, so you take the real-time price, you take the network price, you take the customer preferences, you take whatever things you want into it, and then you build a optimized asset-based charging schedule that is really kind of tailored to whatever the strongest signal is and the best outcome is for those assets, for the system, but also the customer's needs are always met. So this all sounds really cool, right? I mean, we all, but is it actually, sorry, could we, just in the interest of time, let's go to the next slide, please. So, but the real question is this actually real? Like, do customers actually sign up for this? This is the distribution of the EVs. I think we're at about 37,000 right now in the UK. Actually, quite conveniently in lots of grid congested zones. So I'm looking forward to delivering some contracts to you, David, on that. But consumers have a very simple proposition. They sign up to this and they get a 75% discount on the unit cost of electricity that goes into the car. So like, it's super simple. And in the background, all of this is happening. And this is happening today. And these are just 3 ways in which consumers are already participating as long as the price signals are there. So with that abbreviated, we'll just give us 2 minutes to put some chairs up and we'll start the panel discussion. Thank you.
You and Andy are going to get headsets, and the other panelists will get. So, that's an idea about how we make it real. What we're going to do now is have a panel discussion. But while the panel discussion is going on, please think of questions that you want to ask people. And as Alex has mentioned, he did truncate his presentation. So do make a point of finding him during the breaks and asking him the questions about how real it is and how useful a resource it is for the system to be dispatching. So if the panelists could come forward to the stage, so David, Amandine, Alida, Alex and Andy. Andy, could you get a headset on? And for everyone else, we're going to pass the mic between you.
We got the right amount.
We need 6, and if I could get the 3 of you to sort of sit, the 4 of you to sit centre stage, because we're going to pass the mic between you. So, actually no, if the 4 of you sit there, that will work. We'll put Alex and Andy there. So it's sort of network against. No.
Network with, not against.
All together.
Yeah.
All right. All good with the audio? Very good, very good. Thank you very much for all of your presentations. I have to say, it left me filled with optimism. And that's unexpected, let's be honest. In my head, I envision network operators, transmission distribution system operators, as having very different ways of working and ways of thinking. So it's really exciting to hear your approach being very customer-driven, very needs-driven, not the traditional engineering-led, asset-led way of thinking. That you're working in real time with real-world iterations. This isn't a theoretical exercise. This is really happening right now. And this embracing of imperfection, I think, is really, really important. From each of you, I've heard this isn't about designing the perfect solution ahead of time and then launching it, but it's about testing and iterating in the real time, in the real world. And starting with simplicity, I think as well, that really stands out for me here. There's some really simple things. We're in, as Alex rightly said, this is happening today. We have customers with PV, with electric vehicles en masse. So we've got lots of assets to play with. Let's start simple and build up from there. And off the back of that also, the timelines, and David, your timeline, particularly at the beginning, this is about decisions made in weeks and not years. And let's be honest, in the energy industry, historically, decisions have been made over multiple years. And to see decisions here being made in a period of weeks and new services being launched in weeks or months is really very, very exciting. So lots and lots of optimism here. Tempered with something Greg said, which is the challenge we've got is incumbent thinking. And so my question to each of you is, how did you get around that? Did you jump, or were you pushed into this? Maybe we go left to right for want of a better way of starting.
Ooh, it's a cracking question. I think a little bit of both. As we said before, never waste a crisis. Obviously, we understand the backdrop to where we were as an organisation. Obviously, we want to expedite, but I think it was a real catalyst to go from trials, as we talked about, to real action and taking a bold step to move forward. I think what we've learned from that is that cross collaboration with the industry, but making sure that we don't lose that momentum, that pace. And I reflect back to a similar journey that we went through with battery storage at a transmission level, probably back in 2016, 17, around that sort of time. The industry is quite nascent from a ancillary service perspective. We created what we call the enhanced frequency response product, just 200 megawatts, went to market, and that acted as a real catalyst to bring that technology to the fore. And now, it is synonymous with how we operate the grid today. And we've got gigawatts worth of battery energy storage on the system. So I see the journey we've seen that first catalyst is how can we build on it? So, in 5 years' time, actually we're managing a completely different demand curve, because the likes of Octopus and other parties are out there sending those right price signals for the end consumers and businesses to react, making our job a heck of a lot easier. As Chris said, we want to be lazy. Thanks.
Yeah, I think to a certain extent also both we saw already quite fast the changes upcoming in the way the landscape around us was changing with new appliances coming into the system, first on the production, then on the demand side. So that's a big evolution that we of course were closely monitoring. So we saw quite fast that some changes are needed. We were also confronted with adequacy issues, especially more in Belgium. So that makes us also to anticipate. I think where we maybe were a little bit leading is that in the end our sector should also evolve and become more a customer-oriented sector. We truly believe that it is through the interaction with our customers that will bring up that system, which is a little bit more expected. There, I believe we were a little bit more front runner than following on that matter.
Yeah, I can maybe add on that. In Belgium, we have a specific landscape because we don't have so much liquidity to participate in balancing services. We don't have so much volumes. Thus, we quite early open all our balancing services to already demand-side flexibility, which works well, to be honest. We have already some low-voltage batteries in our FCR service, for example. Thus, it completely makes sense now to evolve to such simple solution, I think, and to engage based on price signals, just the flexibility of the customers. And there, I think the TSO has a real place to play. It has to provide this environment for the energy service provider to build such an environment to come with energy services we need as customers.
We've had a long history of tariff reform in Australia. We've been on a journey for a number of years, or a number of decades really, on that, which is, I think, quite unique. That's not necessarily as high on the agenda in other countries, but, rate reform, tariff reform towards cost effectivity. It's gotten to the point where, our regulator, one of the first questions they ask us when we put a rate case together or a proposal together is what response to pricing did you assume in your underlying forecasts, right? So it's very much part of the DNA in Ausgrid, and in Australia, and Ausgrid has always been one of the leading network businesses on that. So it was quite a natural step for us to take. It's quite a natural conclusion for us to come to. However, it wasn't until, I'd say, a rival project or an alternative model was initiated in Australia called Project Edge. Some of you might know about that. That was really the catalyst for us to go, if we want it to be taken seriously and if we wanted to show an alternative way, we needed to get on with it and do that. So partly pushed. But I think the thing that's been unexpected at the moment is how much it's being pulled from suppliers and retailers and solution providers, seeing it as a real way of opening up products for them. So we're being pulled at the moment, I'd say.
Just on that push versus pull, I think that I detected some differences here. Is the future of flexibility about creating services, or is it about creating flexibility as a market? Who's right?
Do you want to, what exactly do you mean by the difference between those two things, if you don't mind unpacking that a little bit?
So whatever example from National Grid, David, was we created a service that we use to solve issues in the grid or to contribute positively to the grid. Contrast that to Armandine and the other David, you talk very much about creating a behind-the-meter market. Are those two complete different approaches, or actually does it all converge into one?
So I think what for me, one of the biggest differences between a service and a market is that in a service, it's not the market setting the price; it's the person providing the service, and you're still trying to set that price at a level that you still clear the market, right? So you still have the same objective, but it's a different way of going about it. And I think that works quite well. A service works quite well where you have low liquidity in a market, and you don't have that competition that really drives a good market outcome. But certainly, we see those things as coexisting. So for network pricing, we think a service or a price is a good way of going about it. But we think wholesale markets, markets is a good way of going about it.
Yeah, I think both are not contradictory. I think you need to open up those markets. And in the electricity, we have those different markets, and the services can be created either by commercial parties or in the balancing market. Of course, the TSO in the end will also need to have some services in order to balance the grid. So it's a combination of both: open the markets, lower the barriers, and services will come. Some will be facilitated by commercial parties in one of those markets. In the end, we need also that energy as a TSO to be activated and to maintain the balancing, and our services are popping in as well.
Yeah, I think I agree. The way that I would articulate is, as a system operator, we will always be the residual balance, so there's always going to be generation demand mismatches going forward. We will have ancillary services both for active energy and other services that require to maintain system stability. That's not going to go away. So there will be markets that can be monetized for flexibility to operate in that perspective. But what's also really important is that demand curve that we look to manage and those active mismatches, that's minimized through creating active markets, wholesale markets, where flexibility can fully flourish as well. So, if you have an asset, you can monetize it both from a market perspective or from an ancillary service perspective. Both are working in tandem to make sure that we hit net zero going forward.
And maybe just to add on that, I think the question we should ask is, we see a lot of the flexibility coming in those balancing markets because we believe they're quite open in a lot of countries. So the big question now: what is needed? What are the barriers that we need to tear down in those other markets to really have also that same kind of liquidity popping into the markets? And of course, you need to. Players like Octopus are offering those kind of services, but we still see that there is a lot of other barriers that needs to be teared down in order to make it happen also in those markets.
Yeah. Picking up on that, talking about tearing down barriers, you showed a great example of how you can change customers' dynamic around charging EVs. You've heard there's concern from the DSOs in particular in Germany that they want control. They want to be able to turn off EV charging because they worry about this sudden ramp up in demand. And yet through 50 Hertz, we have a very forward-thinking TSO saying, well, actually, that's not necessary. You can solve this through markets and through services. What would you say to politicians in Germany to convince them not to go down the traditional route of command and control and open up the German market?
That's a really good question, Andy. I think it all comes down to data and visibility, because right now it's an abstraction, because there is very little real insight into what's happening at every feeder, at every secondary and primary substation. And so therefore, without the visibility of what's actually happening, the default is, how do we minimize all risk, right? And so the deployment of smart meters cannot be emphasized enough. And for those of you from countries where that is no longer an issue, yes, everyone from Scandinavia is very, very happy, and Australia. But the lack of insight and the lack of visibility just leads to the most risk-based behavior, and therefore it's very easy to say, oh well, then of course the easiest thing is to push the big red button. So as soon as you get visibility at a meter point level, and as deployment of visibility of substation and distribution level becomes real time, that fear will fall away, because then you can just say, look, there's a price signal out here, there's a market, it doesn't really matter, right? And that for me is the single biggest thing.
Let's open it up to the floor. Any questions for our panelists? We'll bring a microphone around.
Hands raised, and I'll come to you with the mic. Yes, thank you. Sorry.
Thanks. Question for David. I'm sort of contrasting the Ausgrid model of wanting to stay away from paying people not to use our service with, I think, your model, which to me, correct me if I'm wrong, the costs of running your market are smeared across the energy system. Is that right? How do you fund the purchase of flexibility?
Which David?
Sorry, which
David, National Grid.
Okay, so thank you. Just clear that up. So we were very conscious with demand flexibility service that we introduced. Let's talk numbers. I think 11-12 million pounds that we spent in total on the real life events and the test events. The capture of that value was from customers, consumers, who could participate via having a smart meter. The cost recovery of that is recovered through something called the SUAS, Balancing Services Use of System. That is smeared across every single generator and supplier, and that's levied on them. So it's shared across the network in all users as such.
So going back to the sort of retail supermarket analogy used earlier in the conversations, is that a bit like if you run out of baked beans to sell, you run a market to buy them back and then add a couple of pence to every can of baked beans to fund that?
So I guess if you're running out of beans, the way that we looked at the product, we held it outside of the traditional market. So we've got something called a balancing mechanism. That's gate closes, then we ramp up and down traditional generators who offer us prices. Now, at times of system stress, when you look at planning a system a day ahead, you need margin contingency in case things fall. We were looking at those at tight days during the winter, go, well, can we trade on the interconnect and bring more power in? Is there sufficient volume of generation within the balancing mechanism and a little bit of demand turned down within that we could access? At times where there is insufficient margin or contingency, we go, actually, we need to be prudent here. Let's send out that signal. Let's dispatch DFS, which would pull down the demand. So we would be planning, instead of planning for a 45 gigawatt peak, we'd be planning for 44.5 gig on peak, making sure that you keep the contingency numbers. Starting to get it.
No, I get it. But I suppose where this leads me, and thank you for clarifying so I can understand a bit better. Could you not solve that issue just by having cost-reflective prices for end consumers? Is that an alternate way of doing that?
Fundamentally, if you roll the clock forward 3, 4, 5 years, I think success looks like that we don't need the signal, because fundamentally at those peak times in the network where I think our peak price we paid in the balancing mechanism was around £6,000, folk would be responding to that. There would be half-hourly signals sent through energy suppliers, and participants would be going, oh thanks, I won't take my demand at 6 p.m, I'll take it at 9, 10 p.m. when the system's more secure. So yes, we should, we shouldn't have such a product in 3, 4, 5 years now.
Thank you.
Yeah, one question regarding the situation when we have sufficient supply of flexibility. I think the biggest difference between the energy market and the grid needs is not the time, but the locality. So we can all use the signals of the intraday continuous market and react 5 times before physical delivery to this incentive signal, but we will see significant barriers in the grid, at least in Germany. And I think that's also the source of fear of the grid operators in Germany, that they have the equal reaction of a huge part of flexibility, and they cannot react on a local level, mainly because they do not have the information. We come back to the data Alex just mentioned. But what are your answers to this? Also with this product in National Grid, I didn't get this locality aspect of this product. Maybe you can say some words.
Start with Alida. Can we have the microphone back?
Yes.
Sorry, wait for the microphone.
That's a really good question. Thank you for raising that. I think that's the role of the DSO, is doing locational pricing of capacity of the distribution network, so that when a decentralized optimization algorithm is considering responding to a market, it's also considering the local network, price or what's happening in the local network, and co-optimizing between those things in a decentralized way. So, for example, if you are a resource that's in a part of the network that's unconstrained, most of the time, the services you're going to be delivering or the value you're going to get is that you have free access to the market, right? That there's very few times where the network actually needs you to do anything, so you're going to respond a lot to market signals. If you're in a constrained part of the distribution network, you're actually going to provide a lot of distribution services. You might not have as much access to the market, but you have more access to the network value stream, and that's fine. Like, that's what should happen.
David?
So I think just to answer that question directly, so for DFS, we were agnostic around location in this instance, and I'll explain why. We do have a constrained network across various areas within the UK, when the biggest constraint that we have on the network currently is the transfer between Scotland and England. That bites when it's windy. At the times of system stress, that's when we don't have the wind, so you don't have those constraints there. So we were less concerned about the locality of the service. However, you might have picked up Alex doing a bit of a plug for where his assets are. We are launching a locational product, what's already out in the market, which looks at minimizing constraint costs. And at that point, then to be able to turn demand up is something that we value as well.
Thanks, Marsha.
Thank you. My name is Jochen from the German transmission system operator Jansen BW, and my question goes to Alida and to David. How do you measure somehow the efficiency of those markets? Because in Germany, some people, especially in a regulatory environment, fear decrease claiming, or fear that these markets will increase the costs compared to regulated solutions. So how do you measure the efficiency of these markets?
I think very, very quickly, I think this is an active debate that we're having with the regulator. £12 million of end consumers' money that we spent, and some people could access the value, some people couldn't. It's smeared across. I want the debate to be: don't look around the cost, look about the value that we can create by stimulating the enduring value of flexibility going forward. So that's the way I'm encouraging the regulator to think about it, and I think we're aligned in that respect.
Maybe on how we are looking at it is actually we're looking what the cost saving is that those evolutions in the models could bring. We do every year an estimation, every 2 years an estimation on the adequacy and flexibility needs in our grid. So we see what are the evolutions that we need to contract on balancing services. If we are not doing anything, of course, we're going to integrate more and more renewables. We see that our reserve products will double in volume. So by trying to have more flexibility, which Amandine was referring to, that implicit flexibility coming from market actors, we can actually bring down that doubling to maybe 1.2%, 120% today. So that's actually, you can easily calculate the cost saving on that. And also by flattening the curve, the peak, you have also a cost saving that you can express in the capacity that we contract through the capacity remuneration mechanism. And if you look at those two elements, so we've made the calculations based even on conservative prices of 2019 for the Belgium system, it's a cost saving of around 250 million euros per year. Which is, of course, significant, and which shows actually the benefits and the value that flexibility, only from a system perspective, is bringing. Next to that, we believe that all those services create also a huge economy and around that service economy, which will bring also value. But on that, we don't bring any figures.
Alida, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'll try and be quick. So I think the first thing to appreciate is that we need to change when we use energy, right? So we know that generations become less predictable and more intermittent, and we need to have demand following generation. So we know that's a future problem that we're going to face. We can pretend that we're not going to, but we are, right? So I think that's sort of the first thing, is to say what we have now is more efficient is true. But the generation mix is going to change to get to 100% renewables, and we need to unlock flexibility. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we need to build low-cost solutions. So just because we have this burning platform and we know we need to change doesn't give us a blank check as an industry. And one of the things that we should be mindful of is building perfect solutions and thinking people will come, right? So we need to say, what is the cheapest way I can do this? How can I get to value for a customer as quickly as possible? What's the least amount of investment I can make to get there? Market efficiency, I think it's about access, like how do you lower barriers to access to markets? And for the network, I think what's interesting for us is, we're looking at a sort of cost-reflective dynamic pricing that's reflecting the real cost of providing that service. If building more network is the more efficient solution, then that's what we'll do. We'll build more network.
Let's take one more question. I'll take the first one that went up the back there, and then we will wrap up.
Hi, thanks. Richard Sarti from Nodes. A quick question. You mentioned, Alida, that DSOs, or from your perspective, DSOs are looking at the constraint areas and managing the constraints locally. And David, you're talking about buying flexibility at the local level from the transmission side of things. How do you envisage the coordination between the transmission and distribution in order to do that? And do you think markets could help solve that for you?
An easy question to finish off with. I have great faith in markets.
No, that's an excellent point. Those coordinations should be intensified indeed, and what we see is that yeah, of course, we should avoid to have those opposite signals in the end, where you have from a commodity perspective, you push in one direction and then creating some constraints, or also in the balancing, you create some constraints. So at least on how we are looking at for the moment is working intensively and closely in an interaction with those kind of different congestion mechanisms that there are. Try also to split the commodity world from the access world to the grids, and try to find some solutions that are not contradictory the one to the other. We are not in a system where we're gonna or at least on the balancing perspective, to our opinion, is not the right way in looking at locational signals. I mean, the balancing perspective should be broader and open and make the broader market as possible. But next to that, you will need some solutions indeed to avoid contradictory signals. That's for sure.
So I think trying to do it centrally is flawed, right? I think trying to centrally coordinate between the DSO and the TSO is flawed. I think what we need is like real collaboration, very clear roles and responsibilities, and a system-focused outcome, like system outcome focus in how we design products and services and markets, right? So for instance, in Edith, a lot of what we're doing is just trying to get out of the way of the market, right? That's the way we're very much saying, if we don't need you to do anything for the network, then we're not going to give you a price that makes you do something for the network. Like, we'll get out of the way as much as we can. But if we do need you to do something, then, that's when we'll price it and make sure you get that signal. And that's where I think decentralized optimization to say, well, these are all that value stacks that are open to me, and having them in a compatible format, so that if they are contradictory, so if the market's saying to you, we need you to dispatch, and the network is saying to you, we need you to not dispatch, you can look at those two value streams and trade them off in a decentralized way.
Maybe just to add to that, as a market participant, I look at it very simply, which is, I have a fleet of assets, and I'm going to make the economic best outcome based on all of the inputs that go into my optimization. So I will optimize wholesale. Yes, to the earlier question, there's obviously a flaw if you have a single wholesale market, like a single price in a large wholesale market, because that distorts the reality of the actual physics of where the power is generated and actually consumed. So that's definitely something to look at. But then, there could be a network's price spike in one part, and then that subset of that asset fleet will do one thing, because that is the economic best outcome, and the other part of the fleet will do something else. As long as the price signals are there, and then a set of rules, like, we will forecast the prices of all of those different things, and then when they come in, the optimization will then distribute that action.
So just to finally add to that, I will look at Satiris, who will probably talk about this more tomorrow, but certainly from a UK perspective, as a system operator and all the DNOs or DSOs to be, we are looking at primacy rules, what should have precedent at what times, who should value those most. We are looking to standardize contractual terms as best we can, so that, Alex or whoever's got an asset, that flexibility can play in whichever markets and monetize it as best they can. So it is thorny. There's a lot to do in that sort of area, but the foundations are there and it's been worked on.
Great, thank you very much. Let's wrap up there. I want to say a big thank you to all of our panelists. Let's give them a hand. And thank you to all of you for your questions. Please keep those coming during the break through the rest of today, tomorrow. We're going to take a pause now, I believe, for bathroom break, drinks, and so on, and then reconvene after that.